Hi, everyone. I want to briefly introduce you to our guest, Annie Walker, who started her career with Walmart in 2002 after graduating from tech as an industrial engineer, and she is currently the Senior Vice President of Apparel Merchandise Operations for Walmart US. Over the past 20 years, Annie held various roles, including Senior Director of Replenishment for the General Merchandise Division and VP of the Over-the-Counter team. In her role, she's been responsible for developing and implementing strategies that support and drive the merchant strategy through the store to execution. Annie is a Phi Mu, and she has been active alumna of Georgia Tech, serving on GTAB and the ISYE boards. Annie, I would like to start our conversation by asking you to look back on your journey at Walmart, starting with your graduation from Georgia Tech, and reflect on some key moments of that journey. What were the pivotal decisions that you made? Who were the people supporting you? And what were some hard lessons you learned along the way?
Yeah, well, it's great to be here. Thank you for having me, Emily, and it's great to be talking with all of you. So, man, I can't believe it's been 20 years since I've been on campus. Time flies by so fast. But I can tell you the number one thing that I know is how valuable a Georgia Tech degree is and how valuable that's been for me. But I think back on to my early time at while I was still at Georgia Tech, I had no clue what I wanted to do when I left Georgia Tech. I knew what I was good at, but I didn't know fully where I belonged. And some of you may be able to relate to that in that I remember calling my dad when I was about to graduate, and I told him, "Hey, I don't know what I actually want to do." And he just looked at me and said, "Get a job, like go flap your wings and get out of the nest." So I remember Walmart came to campus, and whether I should admit this or not, for me, it was in my mind a practice interview. I was like thinking, this company out in Arkansas, I'd probably never moved to Arkansas. And it's retail. It was a little different than kind of your typical engineering route. And I really didn't know how big the supply chain was at Walmart at the time. I was kind of naive at that time. And so I went to my practice interview. I ended up loving the people, loving the job opportunity, and they offered me a job in Atlanta for the first 9 months. So once again, I had a crazy mentality, but I thought, well, I'll take the job, and then if they ask me to move, then I'll quit and I'll get another job in Atlanta. And I've been here for 18 and a half years. They asked me to move after 9 months, and I jumped at the opportunity. And I think, it just came down to knowing what you're passionate about, what you're good at, and being able to align those things. And for me, that I found a true passion and love for retail really quickly, and a love for business and a love for merging the engineering mentality with the business side and being able to make a broader impact. And so for me, I think just an early start at Walmart, learning a bit about retail and being able to just, apply a bit of my background, but then also grow within business was really appetizing for me. And it was the people that kind of locked the deal in terms of knowing that I'd be working around a lot of great people and enjoying what I did at the same time. So,
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And you also served as chair for the Walmart Women's Officer Caucus. Can you talk about that and why that group was formed and what was that experience like? And what were some of the challenges that you faced in that role?
yeah, the group was formed back, I'd say, around 2007, 2008. And it started with one female officer. At the time, there was very few, or far less than what we have today. And they were kind of looking at the numbers and going, you know what, we've got a really good representation lower within the organization, but yet we haven't seen as many women progress up into officer roles. And so that's kind of where the Women's Officer Caucus launched, is a passion for developing future women. And so I recently have taken the reins and lead the Women's Officer Caucus, and it's been just a great opportunity. And the focus of the organization and what we're thinking about is, one, just building camaraderie within the women officers and making sure that everyone is building connections and relationships, but then also we help onboard new officers and help support new women to Walmart and ensuring that they're successful and that we kind of are able to see a strong retention rate long term as they join our organization, and then also thinking about giving back and thinking about future talent and women within the organization that want to be officers that aren't. And so for us, it's really around continuing to build up other women and ensuring that we're continuing to grow women into the officer ranks as well. I would say that we have improved. So we've recently released a report on where those numbers are at, and year over year, we're up 1%. I want it to be higher as we continue to build a more inclusive and diverse workforce in general for Walmart. And it's, even within the Women's Officer Caucus, we don't stay within the confines of just saying we support women. Like, we think about diversity, equity, and inclusion and how we can be an advocate for all of the other officer caucuses, whether it's the Black and African American caucus or the Latinx caucus. And so it's really just coming alongside our diversity, equity, and inclusion organization and being an advocate for continuing to make Walmart a great place for everybody.
Thank you for sharing that. As a Georgia Tech alum, you have also served on several boards at Georgia Tech. So could you share with us a little bit about your experience in that role, and what are some ways that alumni can continue to participate in school leadership?
Yeah, I would say, well, first off, board engagement is not just a benefit to the board that you participate in, it's also a benefit to the individual. And I take just as much out of being a part of a board as hopefully I'm giving back to the school. So I've had the opportunity to sit on the Industrial and Systems Engineering Board, as well as now currently on the GTAB board. And if you're not familiar with it, it's President Angel's advisory board. And we just had our last meeting on Friday. And what's really great is, one, you're able to get to know the leadership at the school, but then also better understand big initiatives for the school, and then hopefully give back. And so you're going to see a mix of people across the different industries that are a part of the board, incredibly talented alum that come together. And one, it's a benefit of networking with each other, but then it's also giving back to Georgia Tech and better understanding. And I would share with you that things that I've noticed is, one, Georgia Tech has a great president. And I wouldn't just say that. I'm not, I don't normally say that if I don't truly believe in their leadership, but President Angel has showed just very strong authenticity as a leader. He listens, he shares with us, he kind of opens the books and is willing to answer any question, but authentically also has gotten to know everybody. And then I would also say that he's very strategic. And so we have gone through things like a strategic plan for Georgia Tech and how they're focused, and not just making it a good university, but making it a great university. And then this last round, and I thought, you guys might be interested, is one of the big focuses of the meeting was on just wellness in general, like wellness of students. And how do we make sure that the campus environment is one that continues to enhance a student's experience, and that, Georgia Tech is thinking about wellness from a whole kind of 360 perspective, that it's, mental well-being and physical well-being and emotional well-being, and how are the things on campus matching up to what the school needs to do to ensure that we're creating a positive, strong, call it good wellness overall in general for the students. And so it was great to, one, hear that plan, but then they also asked us for feedback, like, what are we seeing in business and what are we seeing in industries? And I would say that the things that we deal with within business are the same that you see in an educational environment today. We worry about the same things. It's, once you're within a company, it's associate wellness and associate well-being and mental health and all of those sorts of things. And so we're all kind of working the same challenges and thinking about how do we, create the right environment, and knowing what's going on today with COVID and, just so much, whether it's, racial inequity or even the political environment that tends to be a bit more fueled lately. It's how do we create the right environment for anybody who wants to be a part of campus or anybody who wants to be a part of a business. And so that's really kind of the things that we focus on. In each round, we talk about different topics, and then it's really about how do we help shape the thought process, but then also be a part of the vision long term, and make a difference for the school and keep it as strong as it is in the ranks, and continue to support it in the way that we should. So, yeah.
Yeah. I want to bring one of your quotes into this conversation, Annie. You recently said the following words: "We all come together in a work environment with varied backgrounds and experiences. A great leader creates an environment that allows for someone to move from being willing from being willing to be transparent to being willing to be vulnerable. Trust has to be built for that bridge to be crossed." I was wondering if you could expand on these thoughts on transparency and vulnerability in the workplace.
Yeah. Yeah, this is kind of a hard topic because oftentimes in business, sometimes people think that it's okay to keep your cover on and to hide your face or hide who your true self is, which is absolutely not what anybody should ever feel like. And certainly that's been a part of, thinking about how do you create an environment where people can bring their whole self to work and not worry about being judged for that. And when you think about the difference between transparency and vulnerability, transparency is being willing to speak up for the team, but not necessarily saying I'm willing to speak up for myself. And so what does that look like? That looks like someone approaching me as a leader within the organization and saying, hey, I got to tell you how everybody feels. And they're really speaking for everybody, but that there's truth behind what for them. But they're not really truly dropping the blind of here's how I personally feel. And when you kind of cross that bridge into vulnerability, it's someone being willing to say, no, this is me. I speak for myself. I speak for my own, situation and whether I feel comfortable saying what I have to say. And it's, there's, people come from many different walks of life and many different backgrounds and, you name it. And it's being able to, as a leader, like really, really good leaders, cross that bridge with their teams and the people that they support. And I think, sometimes when you're kind of growing, and it kind of goes with the leadership pipeline. If you've ever read the book, The Leadership Pipeline, I don't recommend it because it's kind of a little boring, but it's really good conceptually, which talks about the pipeline, where you progress as a leader within an organization. And as you progress, it requires different skill sets in leading people and leading teams. And you go from an individual contributor to eventually being CEO of a company. And what it takes to be CEO is very different than the lower levels of the organization. But people who, there's two types of really leaders out there that from a focus standpoint, one is a results leader and the other is a people leader. And sometimes, with a very strong education background, you can grow up thinking that results are number one in the core focus. But what really matters once you start leading bigger and broader teams is, are you a great people leader as well? And how are you thinking about leading broader teams and creating an environment where people can truly bring their whole self to work and feel confident of sharing their stories? And so just a small tidbit, one of the ways that I've done that with my team is, in the past we've done like movie recaps. And so I've challenged my team to watch different movies that may bring out a different, like an example would be McFarland USA. If anybody's seen it, it's a great little movie about a track team out in California, but it focuses on the Hispanic community. And after we watched that and had a conversation, you could hear some of our Hispanic associates just start to say, hey, like, this is very similar to how I grew up. This is how my family is. And I come from a family where, this happened and therefore this. And so then all of a sudden you get people talking in a different way. And there's a lot more trust that is built across the team. And you also better understand how can I, better relate to all the people across my team. So I guess that's a long answer for your question, but it's really about how do you build a bridge between just being willing to say, I'm transparent, I'm going to tell you what the issues are, but I'm going to tell you where I stand as well.
Yeah, thank you so much, Annie. We have a question from our audience. Jennifer is wondering, as a recent new hire at Walmart, and a fellow female GT alum. How do I become a member of the Walmart Women's Caucus?
Awesome. Well, first, welcome to the Walmart family. It's great to have you. So I would say, and I don't know where she like kind of is coming in within the organization. I'm going to assume kind of entry level, which is where I started. I started my career very kind of call it base roles. And I think I can confidently tell you Walmart is a performance-based organization, which means if you work really hard and you do incredibly well at what you do, you will succeed. And what worked for me within my career is always keeping my head down and not worrying about what's the next best thing or, what can I do? And there were times where I navigated different moves within my career. And sometimes you do have to advocate for yourself. But 99% of what happens at Walmart is all about job performance. If you are the best at what you do and you're making a huge difference and you're thinking strategically and you're demonstrating the skill sets of rising the pyramid, then promotions happen and they happen pretty rapidly. And you'll at times move laterally or move up, but it certainly comes with really strong performance, and that's always the number one thing. In terms of what gets you to the next level role. But I will say that, relationships do matter, and building relationships across the organization, because if people don't know you, then that also can be challenging. So.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice, not only for Jennifer, but for all of us.
Yeah.
Thank you. I want to ask you, so across industries, COVID-19 has severely impacted the supply chain. We know this, but how has this affected Walmart specifically? And what are some key issues that your team has faced over the last year and a half, and how are you addressing those?
We've had no issues. It's all been perfectly fine and dandy. That is a complete joke. I might have a few extra gray hairs from what's been going on this past year. I have never been in a job at Walmart with a more dynamic environment of what's happening. And the way that I describe it to everybody is it feels like you're holding a bucket with a ton of holes and you're putting your fingers through the different holes and you think you've solved it. And then another hole appears and you just go, oh my gosh, I didn't even expect that one as a result of this one. And so I would just say huge challenges. I mean, just from a total supply chain. And another way that it's easier to understand, if anybody has watched Netflix's Manifest. I don't know, have you seen that Manifest?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so the concept is that everybody, like this group of people got on a plane and then in midair, they go through this time warp and then they land 5 years later. That's what happened in the supply chain, like hands down from a volume perspective. When it first happened, you could see it in the food industry big time because the food industry used to be built for a partial restaurant business and a partial consumer business. And all of a sudden, when you're not bulk packaging food for a restaurant industry and you need to do individually packed of everything, you all of a sudden have huge supply component issues, raw material issues, and everything just cascaded backwards. And so you see, definitely a shift of the consumer from less services, more product focus, right? So less vacations, less flying, less hotels, less rental cars, you name it, in a heavy shift into let's take care of our home, let's build up our home, let's do interior decorating, let's buy the kids a trampoline for the backyard so that they have something to do. But you saw a huge shift and it caused a huge challenge backwards. And from a volume perspective, you can see that from a port standpoint. And so what I'd say is what you're reading in the news, pretty true. But I think the important thing and what I've been focused on in my job, so I handle the entire apparel supply chain for Walmart US, both the stores as well as e-commerce. And I continue to try to play, I always use like references, but heads up ball, right? So like you think about like basketball and learning as a kid, and they always told you keep your heads up and look out. And that is what we are constantly trying to do is think about, okay, what does a long range plan look like? What do we think the next year, 2, 3, 4, 5? I mean, we've built out quite far just trying to think, okay, what does this look like? And then not to mention the consumer's changing really, really fast. Their preferences between, do I want to physically walk into a store, or do I want it shipped to my home, or do I want, you name it. In fact, we're even testing drones now. So there's so many different ways that the customer is changing and what they're comfortable with, what they're not comfortable with, what they want to continue to do. And so we have to be nimble, we have to be quick, and we have to, make our best bet. And I guarantee you, this is the only, there's a few jobs in America where you can always be wrong. Weatherman is one, but also anything in retail, you're probably guaranteed to be wrong as well. But hopefully we're at least close enough that we don't cause too many challenges. But it's been fun, but real and challenging.
Has there been one thing that you've learned in this time that's just like really helped you overcome these issues?
Ooh, that's a good question. Um, I think from a communication standpoint, not underestimating how much your people know and see, and keeping your ear to the people who are handling the issues every day, and being able to handle upward communication as well as downward communication. You think about who knows what's happening best. And just to give you like an example, the men's socks replenishment manager knows more about what's happening in the sock industry than I will ever know, and knows more about what's happening with their suppliers and whether they can get trucks, and if they can get trucks, what's happening or what the suppliers need. And so for me, it's just re-emphasize the importance as a leader to be as close to my team and the people working the everyday issues, being able to translate that, understand it, and then also be able to operate in a more strategic role and be able to manage between those two realms. And so that has been critical, because I've learned a ton from my team. I have an awesome team of people, but I also have had to, stay in the strategy side as well, and make sure that I don't get pulled too far into the details and not run the strategic side of the business. And so balancing those and the critical role that you play at this point within an organization.
Awesome. That's awesome advice. So speaking of learning, what individual skill sets do you predict will be essential for the future of work? And is there one in particular that Walmart is looking for?
Yeah. Well, first, and I wouldn't just say this, Georgia Tech is dead on in the right space of building skill sets for the business environment in the future. In retail, data is everything. Data analytics is everything. And I love that Georgia Tech is hugely focused on curriculum around data analytics, because it will pay off big time. I have definitely taken my team up a notch in terms of the skill set of the ability to mine data, get to it, and then interpret it. And so I've been, inching up the percent of people on my team that can do a lot of that type of work, because just access to data can tell you so much. It tells you everything about the customer, and it tells you everything about where you've been and where you need to go, and how you can continue to improve the business long term. And so I would say data analytics is critical. A kind of people who come and interview with us where they say, hey, I've gone and gotten a computer science background and business, or computer science and industrial engineering. They're really thinking strategically about what will really help them long term. And I would say that technical skill set matched with data analytics is a magic combination in retail right now. And I would say a magic combination across business as well. I mean, if you look and study, and I'm sure you guys study leadership decisions at big organizations, a lot of the people that Walmart's placed are people with a good tech background. In some of the high levels where we always try to have a good mix of external talent and internal talent. And the way of the future for retail is really, being able to have that kind of, call it tech skill set. And a way that translates down to the stores is our store associates. We now announce that we've given many of the people in the store roles a phone. And the reason being is that gives them access to data, it gives them access to information. We can better make decisions on the store floor if they have access to information in a different way than we have in the past. And so all that to say, I think that you all are at the right school, and I wouldn't just say that, for skill sets of the future and what matters in retail.
Awesome. Thank you, Annie.
Yeah.
I think Kabir has joined us.
Yay.
Hi, everybody.
There he is.
Hi, Kabir.
Hello.
Thank you so much for being with us. Everyone, Kirankumar is the Senior Director, too, of Global Culture, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Walmart.
Great. Well, thanks very much for having me. I'll jump right in. Annie, thank you for inviting me, and thanks to everyone for hosting us today. I've been asked to speak a little bit about our diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts at Walmart. And I've got 2 slides which I'm going to share, but before I do that, I just wanted to give a little bit of background in context. The evolution of DEI, it's been ever changing, I guess, or the state of DEI has been ever changing, over decades and decades. If you look back the 1940s and 50s, and you look at like integration of the armed forces, and then you start to look at the civil rights movement of the 1960s. You start to look at targeted programs in the 80s around affirmative action, other programs like that. And then you start to see disparate impacts in different groups. It's kind of like, as a society, sometimes we haven't quite learned how to walk and chew gum at the same time. We'll make progress in one area and kind of regress in others. The journey of corporations has been very similar in diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I would almost call where we are today at like civil rights 2.0 or 3.0. We're really starting to get towards root cause challenges. Much of that has been accelerated in the last 2 years, really since June of 2020 and the murder of George Floyd, and so many others. But really, that is a tipping point, for shining a light on a challenge that's just existed for hundreds of years and kind of had its moments of attention and non-attention. So I think, as I look at Walmart, I joined the company 8 years ago. I spent most of my time at walmart.org on the charitable side of the house. And there's an overlap with philanthropy and DEI, like what do we do in the world to create a more equitable society, and an overlap with what do we do internally in the company, which is where I work today. I work in our Office of Culture, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And it's interesting, I was on a call with probably 50 other leads for diversity, equity, and inclusion at other companies earlier today. And one of them turned to me and said, "Hey, how come you have culture in your title? We're trying to get culture in our title, and why can't we get it? Why do you have it? And when did you add it? Did you add it last year? Did you add it, at the end?" So actually, it's been a part of our title for as long as I can remember, and definitely before I started. And if you think about the origin of Walmart, right, it really was trying to address inequity and access. You functionally had people in rural areas throughout the United States who were paying more money and couldn't access goods. And that inherently, you call it equity, it's just unfair, right? Now, there certainly are potentially more costs in getting products to remote areas, but there was a disproportionate pricing because it could be done. And the premise, and I was always surprised. I'm born and raised in California, never thought I'd work at Walmart, never thought I would be out living in Arkansas. I was absolutely surprised when I got out here of just how much Walmart is often a lifeline in the community. And people used to say to me, my friends include, "Hey, you work at Walmart, you guys are just going into communities." And as I spend time in the field, what I realize is we don't go into communities. We're often of communities, right? We are employing local individuals, buying from local suppliers, when possible. It's not always possible. And really helping invest back into that local community. And if you take the culture component of equity and access, it's truly where Walmart was founded, help people save money and live better. So the culture part is really what sustains diversity, equity, and inclusion. If you don't have culture right, you can do all the activities around DEI, and that's simply just going to fall off and not sustain. And so many of the challenges that we see today and where companies have shifted is to really say, we need to expand our way of thinking to get to root cause level issues. It's not even just one system. It's how all the systems work together to perpetuate inequity. And what can we do to really help think about what we call, what we leverage. It certainly didn't invent this, a shared value approach. And shared value is more than just, the name shared value for both of us. What shared value is saying is, how does a company change its not only its policies and practices, but its mindsets to implement change in its operating model to also achieve a social outcome of driving equity and increasing equity. So I wanted to open with that and give a little bit of framing. I'm going to just share 2 quick slides, and I'm happy to pause and answer questions if we have time for that. So give me just a moment.
Vera, I had shared with them that coming from Georgia, I was of the mindset that I wasn't going to move to Arkansas as well. So now the whole, organization will think, oh, wait, okay, California, Georgia, but it's all good.
There we go. Can you see my slide on my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. Sorry, I'm more of a Zoom user than a Blue Jeans user, so I want to make sure that I'm getting this right. All right. So I wanted to share, we recently released just a couple weeks ago our mid-year report, and like the entire world, Walmart is making an attempt to be more transparent and more data-driven. And I'm sure Annie talked about this, but it's so important. People don't want to know just, hey, what are you going to do? They want to know, why are you doing it? What's the focus and what are you trying to do? And so we now publish all of our DEI data twice a year. It's on our website. You can play with it. If you just type in, Walmart diversity mid-year, it should come up right away in Google. And I'll share a couple of interesting, observations, what you see here. So our diverse representation is increasing, which is good. But it's not just about representation, right? It's also who are we hiring, who are we promoting, and who ends up leaving the company. And we have a lot of promotions from hourly to management. You can see some of the numbers up there on the slide. I won't drain the slide. But what I will say is Walmart is not immune to the trends. And what we did see is a reduction of women in the overall workforce. This has happened a lot during COVID. Not an excuse, but something we're paying very close attention to. And while we did have an increase of officer representation in women in the United States, we did see an overall decline of the workforce. And it was relatively small, but still it mattered enough. We're at about 53, almost 54% women in our workforce, but that's about 1% lower than where it was pre-COVID. I think a couple other call outs I'll mention here. Management representation for people of color has increased. Walmart, we're almost at 38. We're at 37% and change. And officer representation is up. But what we are getting very particular about doing is disaggregating the data and starting to say, okay, we want to understand what does that mean for each of the groups within an area. Because if we set a universal desired outcome or goal for everyone, then we have to measure within the groups, are we reaching that goal? And if we're not, what's the gap, right? So we are seeing increases in both African American representation, Asian, Latinx. I think we've definitely got opportunities, as we say at Walmart, areas where we can improve in all of those areas. and we have to remain really diligent about understanding, where are we doing well, where are we not. Globally, Walmart's in 20 plus countries, and so we work closely, although each country sets their own strategy. For example, for Walmart.org, where I used to be, did invest with Walmart Canada to support Black and Indigenous communities. In Canada, there's been a lot in the news lately, again, systemic issues for First Nations and Indigenous individuals there for quite a while. But it came to light and came to a head with a lot of the global activism that we've seen, which is a good thing. And also, as we think about Walmart Mexico, Central America, we're also thinking about other levers we can pull on, associates and customers and suppliers. How do we advance that work? And Massmart, which is in South Africa, it's throughout Africa, but headquartered in South Africa, is very focused on increasing representation of people with disabilities in the workforce. The other piece, which is very exciting, and I couldn't tell you how significant this is for us, is Walmart does quite a bit around accessibility. And we think about accessibility in an omni-channel fashion, digital and physical, right? Everything from our external facing websites to our internal technological tools to our physical stores and parking lots and so on. So we have a little bit of a unique challenge trying to make sure we do both really well. And we do that in some cases good, in some cases really good or well and really well. But we found that we want to see a more integrated approach. So we've launched our Accessibility Center of Excellence. Very recently, we just announced that we're launching this, and it's a team which is focused on the integration of this work, both digital and physical. And we just named a new head of the center yesterday, and she'll be starting in a few weeks, and she'll be building out a team. And we're really looking for experts in accessibility. I would call out that over 1 billion people globally are living with a disability. It would be classified as one of the largest groups, individuals who are underrepresented. And the next slide is a couple of other interesting things that we're seeing is for the first time, we included age data in our mid-year report. And we found that the average age of our U.S. workforce is about 38 years old. And the largest percentage of our associates are 20 to 24. And I think what that represents is an opportunity of, most people would think of Walmart as a place you go for temporary job or someplace, you don't see yourself necessarily building a career there. But that's not the Walmart of today. There really are opportunities to start a career and grow your career. And there are a ton of programs that Walmart is now offering, including completely free college tuition, whether it's an associate's degree, a bachelor's degree, or even GED equivalency or high school equivalency. We now offer programs where we cover all those expenses, including books, for individuals, to learn the skills that they're looking to learn while they work. We also, I'm going to skip to the far right, but one of the other things we think about it as an ecosystem for Walmart is the power of the invoice and partnering with our suppliers. So we source over $13 billion annually in goods and services from nearly 3,000 diverse suppliers. And part of what we think about, again, we have to take an ecosystem approach, is not just, hey, are we hiring a diverse supplier, right? We want to know, are they in a position to succeed and grow their business to meet the demands of Walmart? And so, I can tell you an example where we started to look at supplier financing. And if we can accelerate the terms of payment to a supplier, right, it increases the velocity at which they can reinvest in their business and grow their business. And that's good for everybody. If they're stronger, they're a better partner to Walmart, we can better serve our customers. But we start to think about it more than just the surface level, but can we go deeper and understand what's really going to strengthen? And if it's a diverse owned business, you're talking about creating generational wealth in different ways. as well as, supporting needs of the community. So there's a lot of great things if we get that right. And again, that's how do we change our operating model to do well. And the last area I'll talk about, I'm just hitting on a few highlights here, is our shared value networks and our Center for Racial Equity. So this is a body of work that I've got a team that leads, and it really goes back to that first statement I was talking about how do we make a difference in our operating model that's going to be good for the business, which makes it sustainable and good for society. And it doesn't mean that we're not investing in society. We committed, in fact, $100 million over 5 years to make investments through nonprofit organizations, through Walmart.org and the Center for Racial Equity. We just announced $3 million worth of grants a few weeks ago. But we also really want to get to sustainably changing the way that our business operates. And we have focused in on 4 systems: criminal justice, education, finance, and health. And these are 4 topics which align to the Business Roundtable, if you're familiar with them, large consortium of different companies. They have kind of 6 areas, but we said, hey, we believe Walmart has unique leverage around these 4 topics. So in the United States, we have pharmacies in 49 states, right? The question is are we training our pharmacists and healthcare workers, setting them up for success to serve the communities where they live and work? And often the communities where they're from, right? So do they understand that diabetes or hypertension or heart disease might be conditions that disproportionately affect communities of color? So we have a group of individuals, almost 80 individuals, who are embedded in these businesses, but as a part of their day job are also taking an equity lens and saying, hey, is there something that could be done differently, to reduce the gap? I think sometimes we overcomplicate things, but good DEI work is really asking, from an equity point of view, are we increasing the gap, maintaining the gap, or decreasing the gap? And if we decrease the gap, we generally generate better outcomes for all. Same thing for criminal justice, education. I talked about, it used to be our $1 a day program. Now it's free for educational advancement. We're finding disproportionately positive representation in communities of color utilizing that program. And so we're very excited to see, how do we help raise everyone who wants to raise their educational level, which can help them advance their career and grow. And same thing with finance. How do we empower our associates to think about, ways in which they can build wealth? What does that look like? How do we understand supplier diversity, which I mentioned earlier, but really get granular. I mean, if you love complexity, come work at Walmart. And if you love within Walmart complexity, you look at diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is a challenging area. But we really see opportunities to say, hey, what if we change this? Wouldn't it be cool if we did this? Not only wouldn't it be cool, but couldn't we drive better outcomes for everyone who's involved, or associates, or customers, or suppliers, and so on. We're working on developing racial equity training for many of our third-party partners and stores. We're opening up training academies in different places. We've also extended doula coverage in Georgia. We're trying to learn, as part of a medical plan. We often find that there are disproportionate health equity issues for communities of color, but having assistance or representation can actually make a big difference when striving for equitable medical outcomes. So I'm gonna stop there, if that's all right. I think we're very excited. I'll just perhaps add one thing, which is, if you really look at the mega outcome of what we're trying to achieve, right? It is belonging. And a lot of people, I said, complicate diversity, equity, inclusion, say it's, we got to do this and we got to do that. And to me, it's come down to a very simple question. Do you feel like you belong where you are? And if not, why? If so, why? If you start to ask, and I imagine everyone on this call is innately curious, if you start to ask yourself, why do I feel like, or why does someone who I work with or someone I go to school with not feel like they belong? By addressing those issues, you can get to root cause of understanding. In a work environment, is it I don't feel like I'm getting paid as equally as someone who's doing the same job? Is it I don't see people like me in positions of leadership? Is it, I'm not able to grow or advance my career? But if you answer that question, it actually tells you what your interventions need to be to create more positive outcomes for all. So I believe, diversity, equity, and inclusion lead towards belonging, and your culture is what's going to sustain that belonging. So I'm happy to stop there and take questions,
Thank you so
or
much.
give people some time back.
Thank you for those wonderful insights. I do have a question from the audience for both of you that touches on that topic of culture. Someone has asked, I have heard from other speakers from Walmart that they had Walmart culture mentors as well as other mentors. So what is it about the organization that makes having a culture mentor valuable, and how does this information transfer to other organizations?
Annie, would you like to start, or would you like me to?
Yeah, I'm happy to take a stab, and then you can, I'm sure, put the icing on the top. So, I would say Walmart has a unique culture, and we have, call it three principles from the past that we've always kind of stuck to, and then we've added integrity within the last 15 years to it. But it's strive for excellence, service to the customer, and respect for the individual. And when you come into the Walmart culture, I would say it's not a bad culture, it's not a scary culture, but every organization you have to know and understand how to navigate and how to work across, and like what is the driver of success within an organization. And when you understand that, then you know how to apply yourself and how to be successful within the organization. And so I think, anytime you join any company or, you name it, not just Walmart, understanding truly how to navigate, how to build relationships, and what is the foundation of definition of what performance looks like within an organization in order to help you be successful. The great thing, when we say Walmart culture, there's a few kind of silly things that we have, like you would say the Walmart cheer is a little different. Some people are like, wait, you have a Walmart cheer? Yes, we do. But there's lots of little things that you can learn along the way. But hopefully people would find the culture to be also one of acceptance, one of it's okay to be different. It's okay to come to work as yourself, be your whole self, and contribute in a way. But when you say learn the Walmart culture, it's truly just learning how do I navigate. Veer, would you add anything to that, or?
Yeah, what's the quote? Culture eats strategy for breakfast, right?
There you go.
And I think as we look to the future, culture is going to matter more and more. It already has. I think, I remember Annie, Doug would show this video of like all the companies that would, were number one, and they'd kind of slowly fall off over the last 50 years. And you'd see Sears up there. And when's the last time anyone's been to a Sears, right? And so I think that strategy is important, but the culture is what allows for, if it's done right, trust, and allows you to move quickly and adapt. And we live in that world of uncertainty and adaptability where we have to move faster. So there are absolutely culture mentors, and it's really critical to distinguish culture and values from behaviors, because behavior 25 years ago is not necessarily acceptable today. And we all do a lot of work to delineate and say, yes, these things, respect for the individual matters. And there's a phrase you said, which is we want everyone to bring their whole self to work. And I would say in recent times, Annie, that's absolutely true to an extent. I think we're also saying these are our culture and values. If you subscribe to values of respect for the individual, then Walmart is a place for you. And so we want people to bring not just themselves to work, but their best selves to work. And the culture is what's really going to help carry that through.
Thank you both. That's very, very insightful answer to that question. And kind of touching on a similar topic, I have another question from the audience, which is what type of leadership style does Walmart promote culturally, and how did your personal style develop and then change over the years, according to that?
I would say Walmart promotes several different leadership styles. I wouldn't say, when I think about the executives that, between Doug and the people within his leadership team and then kind of cascading down from there, I would say varied leadership style. There's some things that we don't vary on, and, integrity is one that isn't, like, it's not okay to vary on that. Ethics, we don't vary on ethical violations or choices in that regard. Character, we don't vary on character and how that comes to life. But other than that, in terms of what you do is incredibly important, but how you do it also becomes really important. And there's probably certain leadership styles that I would say don't do well within Walmart. And I'll just give you like an example: a high ego. Someone who has an incredibly high ego, we get nervous that they might make choices for themselves versus choices for the customer. And we always center every decision at Walmart around the customer, not Annie's choice. Like, I'm not the customer, but I better care exactly what the customer cares about and drive all my decisions around that. And so I would say that there's probably certain character traits that you wouldn't see often in the halls at Walmart. You might occasionally, but in general, there's, I would say a, really strong work ethic is typically seen across the organization. A desire to win or be successful, a high aspiration, a high desire to achieve, and then, the ability to deliver and execute and perform, all things that we look for when we start talking about it. And I guess the way to describe it is in the dimension of how we see potential. And we usually describe that as aspiration, agility, and achievement, ability to achieve. And so all those things matter. And I would say those kind of weigh in on what we would say is a good leader, so to speak.
Yeah, thank you so much, Annie. Both of you, in closing, I just want to ask if there's any topic that you wanted to share on that we have not yet explored, or any advice that you think you need to share with our audience here.
Sure, I can go, Annie, and then you can maybe close it out. I think, and I'll answer a little bit of your last question combined with this, which is when I joined the company 8 years ago, I thought, like, I'm going to be here for 18 months. I'm going to put Walmart, which is Fortune 1, on my resume, and I'm going to move on to the next gig. Because I moved out from Silicon Valley, and that was the culture out there. 8 years later, here I am. And what I would say is I've really learned to distinguish between things that are complicated and things that are complex. And in embracing complexity, which there's plenty of, that is where growth and learning happens. So while I've been at the same company for 8 years, I feel like I've probably had 6 different jobs, even though my title's only changed once, right? Because at every step, you're taking on a new challenge, you're learning something new, and the pace at which you do it just accelerates your learning curve in ways that I never could have imagined. So that's my learning. I'll share it and then turn it over to you, Annie.
I think that's awesome. And Kabir, thank you so much for joining us and being a part of this, because you were just awesome, and great message. I think the best bit of advice that I have for people who are kind of thinking about what's next within their career is change. It's very easy coming out of school to, kind of want security or want, and Georgia Tech does a pretty darn good job of teaching how to be adaptable and change. But one of my favorite quotes that Meg Whitman, former CEO of HP, said, she came and spoke at one of our officer meetings, and one of the questions they asked her was, what's one of your biggest regrets as you look back, having led an organization? What would you have done different? And I'll never forget what she said. And she looked at everybody and she goes, I underestimated, I think, how resilient a company can be through change. And change is constant. It's inevitable. You have to embrace it. You have to change. Like, if you don't like change, you need to change your mentality and pretend you love it until you do. Because in the retail environment, we are constantly changing. You're going to read announcements that, hey, an organization sold this or cut this in order to go here. And just change is a natural part of business and a natural part of understanding truly what you're in business for and how you shape everything that you do around that. And with that comes the need to continue to be an adaptable leader, continuing and growing. Like, education doesn't stop where you guys are at. It continues all the way through your career. And if I stopped learning, I won't be in this job too much longer, because I have to continue to adapt my skill set and adapt my learning and adapt my thought process and be thinking about what's next, be thinking about where the customer's going, be thinking about where the industry's going, be thinking about what's the next play, how do we set up this business for long-term success. And so I would just encourage everybody to, have a healthy mindset around change. And if you don't, figure out how to get there, because it's inevitable and it will be with you your entire career.
Yeah, embracing change. That's a beautiful mindset for us all to take with us into this coming weekend, I think. That's really great. Thank you, Annie.